3, 2, 1. Boom. Conversations with interesting people. Our guest today is Keegan Witbeck, professional MMA fighter. And the question I know everybody's thinking as they're watching right now is, do you think you could kick my ass?
Well, as an MMA fighter, you kind of gotta have that mindset that you can go in and kick anybody's ass. So.
Dude, you would kick my ass so bad, it would not even be funny. So, just for people that are listening, for today, we've tried to be a little more politically correct with our language, I think, in our past shows, but that is not going to happen today. It is going to be no holds barred. We're going to be talking about life and MMA and all kinds of stuff. So I want you to know that you don't have to censor yourself. My goal for this show is, just like I call it Rogan for the rest of us. Like, I don't want it to be, oh my God, I can't say that because of whatever, or, the University of Iowa may fire me if I say something on the record. Like, none of that. I want us to just, talk about anything you want to, but I guess the first thing is...
So if you're going to get fired, we should make it worth it, right?
Not me, man. I don't work there. Yeah, absolutely. It's the same thing when people talk about, if I'd taken that thing from the store to get arrested, I would say, no, man, if I'm going to get arrested, it was something way better than something at the grocery store I forgot to pay for. Tell everybody a little bit about you and your life, what you do for a living. I gave it away a little bit, but fill us in.
Well, I'm a professional MMA fighter out of Iowa City, Iowa. Born and raised in Muscatine. I lived in Dubuque, Iowa for like the last 5 years, up until like a couple years ago. I would like to say I'm a country boy. I mean, all I do is I hunt, fish, and fight. So my day is I wake up, I train, I use my free time to go hunting, fishing, I train again, free time hunting, fishing, train again, and then try to use my nights to relax, but that usually doesn't happen till about 9:30, 10 o'clock. So.
Nice. So that's a long day. So you don't have a support job then? You're a full-time professional athlete?
Yeah, technically, yes. I do have a part-time job right now. I usually keep a part-time job. I don't know if you've heard of Sports Column.
I actually haven't.
It's a popular sports bar in Iowa City for the college kids, cool. Especially during football season. I bartended there for a year, and then I took a few months off of work, and now I actually bartend at Cactus, numero uno, downtown.
So if Keegan is the bartender, they do not need a bouncer.
That is correct. I actually just had to break up a fight between two people who claimed that they were MMA fighters, Friday night. So
how embarrassing for them that you, a professional fighter, is stepping in and you're like, you guys are jerks, like whatever. So, how'd you get started in the sport of MMA, and walk us through kind of that transition in your life?
I did Taekwondo, and I boxed a little bit when I was younger. And then as I kind of got older, playing, so it actually started in flag football. I had two coaches, Kelly Krenz and Tracy Wheeler. They were my football coaches. They were also the junior club wrestling coaches. At the time, I didn't know this. Well, instead of ripping people's flags off, I was just full bore tackling them, perfect form, double leg. And so they pulled my mom aside and they were like, "You need to get this kid in the wrestling room." So I started wrestling in 2004, 2005, and wrestled grade school, junior high, qualified and placed at state in Iowa, had over 100 career record with over half of them pins. Wow. And then I took a year off of high school, between high school and college, and then I went back to school and I wrestled for the University of Dubuque.
Okay. So how did you get from collegiate wrestling sort of into mixed martial arts?
I tore my rotator cuff and labrum when I was in college, and so I had to take some time off, and I didn't know what to do. And at that point, the coaches and I were kind of butting heads because they thought I was faking it, and they wouldn't send me to go get an MRI. The school wouldn't. So I had to go to my personal doctor, go get all that stuff done, and then bring it back to the school.
They thought you were what? Being a pussy and being like, I can't do this stuff. I just don't want to.
Basically, I could make it through like 3 or 4 matches before my shoulder started to give out, and then
3 or 4 matches. All right. Yeah. So I met you once before 5 minutes ago, and we talked for less than 5 minutes at Cooper's house. you do not strike me as somebody who pussies out on anything. Like, just
Right.
looking in your eyes. Like, those coaches, either you were really different or those coaches were way off the mark.
Well, and that
you
was
strike
just
me as that kind of guy.
You know, I've always been one of those people that's like, if you have my back and you respect me, you know, I'm going to do the same to you. And I just felt like they didn't, you know, really fully have my back like they should have. I mean, I'm somebody I've fought an MMA fight with a broken leg. And so, you know, it kind of just rubbed me wrong. And I was like, you know, I don't know if I want to go back and wrestle. I have 2 more years. I don't know if I want to go do that. I can finish my degree, but I can train. And so I talked to, he was a GA, he was a graduate assistant coach at the time, and he was also a chiropractor. And he wrestled, and he's just a really well-known person in the community. And he's like, hey man, you got what it takes to fight. You already have previous history. You know, you love to scrap. You know, do you want to start fighting? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to start doing that. He kind of put me in contacts, and he's like, but, you know, you might be able to stand up, you might be able to wrestle. It's going to get you a long ways, but, you know, you need to start doing jiu-jitsu. So I got a hold of the instructor that was in Dubuque, a gym that had just opened.
These are the guys that you've reached out to.
Oh, they're now here in Iowa City?
Yep.
Okay.
And so it used to be Bonsai Jiu-Jitsu, but now the affiliate is a TAC team.
Oh, he's got to get Matt in here, bro.
Yeah. So Matt is my instructor. He's one of the youngest and most talented black belts in one of the hardest weight divisions, and he's won worlds. He's amazing. But so I contacted the affiliate gym that was up there called Dubuque Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Just opened up. It was being ran by Eldon Giannakouros. And I was like, you know what? I want to start doing this that way. And I was like, man, how are these guys choking me out?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm taking them down. I'm holding them down. Like, why am I getting choked? So after a solid 6 months of doing that, you know, learning how to escape, proper positioning, and that kind of stuff, I took my first MMA fight.
Okay.
And I've been fighting ever since. And it was just other than the year that I took off. But it was crazy because my very first fight, which is probably my most memorable one, you can hear the commentators, they say, oh, you got to watch out for Keegan, he's a wrestler, blah, 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 doesn't have very good stand-up. 2 seconds later, I knocked the guy out with a head kick. So it was, that kind of set the pace. That was my very first fight.
Which one was the first one? Was that Jeff?
No,
That's the one I watched last night in its entirety. We're going to talk about that eventually.
It would have been against... Click over. It is one of the ones that I sent. Next.
It's
that one right there.
Okay. Let's go a little bit more broadly, and then we definitely can review some footage. You know, so MMA is an interesting thing because right about the time you're talking about sort of getting involved in, you were transitioning from wrestling sort of into that. That was kind of when I first became aware of the sport. So The Ultimate Fighter 1, season 1, was really when I'd never even heard of it before, and I thought it was that Tough Man contest, you know, where everyone fought the same people and they were just big fat dudes in boxing gloves, and like when people started talking about it, I didn't really know what it was, and so when The Ultimate Fighter 1 came out was when I kind of first became aware of it, and then back then it was much more segmented into the disciplines. You know, and I'm going to assume anybody who's listening to us this far knows a little bit about the history of MMA and how the Gracies, you know, came to America and how Hoist Gracie just like whipped the shit out of everybody with this technique that basically nobody had seen. But even when I first started watching, it was Chuck Liddell, he's a striker. Now he had a wrestling background, but he kept it on its feet. You know, and thus and so is a BJJ fighter. Thus and so is a Kung Fu fighter. And it was very much this segmented thing, but now it strikes me that you really can't, and I want to get your opinion. It seems to me that you have to be well-rounded. You're going to get mauled. Is that your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be, and you know, it used to be like kind of wrestlers were kind of taking over MMA. You know, they would come out of college, you know, years of wrestling pedigree, you know, and you know, Olympic style wrestling, folk style wrestling, freestyle, all that. And then they transition and they come right out and they start fighting MMA and they're doing amazing, winning belts and all this stuff. But now, you know, you got some very skilled Muay Thai fighters, you got some decently skilled boxers, you have people with just cardio that's insane, that never get tired. Then you have your jiu-jitsu black belts, and now it's almost hard for people to come out of college and start doing so well, because you got kids now that don't want to work a full-time job. They don't want to have to settle down. They don't want to go to college. They just want to fight, and they start training, and they've either been training their whole life, or they start training when they're in high school or when they're 17 years old, and by the time they're 19 or 20, they already have 6-7 professional fights under their belt.
Do you think there's a discipline, of all the many disciplines that are out there, do you think there's one that is paramount? Like, if you had to pick one as the best, is there one, or is everything equally important?
I would say everything's probably pretty equally important. I mean, majority of fights end up on the ground. But as I figured out in my last fight, not all fights go to the ground.
Right.
And sometimes you have to bite down and stand up, and you want to be as proficient as you can in every area. So I don't say you have to be the best in every one, but at least you're proficient and pretty well rounded.
By the way, we don't have an official video of his last fight, but I have all the footage that I got, so we could still review it if we wanted to.
So one of the things that we'll get there is that, like, I was able to internet stalk you last night, and I, by the way, thank you for filling in on such short notice. Our guest canceled, but I'm at least as excited to have you here as anybody else, because I'm a big fan of MMA. And last night I got to totally stalk you on YouTube and watch some of your stuff. So we're definitely going to talk about that. And I asked Cooper if there was footage of the last fight. And we didn't seem to have any, but we'll definitely get there. So it's going to be interesting, I think, in the sport going forward, because it's no longer, it seems to me, this segmented thing. And then, so I'm 40 years old, and when I was a kid, if you were going to wrestle, high school is where it started. And so, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist. So I see a lot of middle schoolers and high schoolers, and they're starting them wrestling now quite young. And so as somebody who is a fan of MMA, it makes me think, wow, because if I've never had a fight, I'm never going to have a fight, not going to claim to be an expert the way that you are. But if someone said to me, what do you think would be a foundational thing? It seems to me that grappling in general is so important, because it lets you dictate where the fight goes. I've seen you do that in the fights of yours that I reviewed. But I think you're right. As it goes along, there definitely is going to be this hybrid. And we're seeing it now in some of the champions that are out there, that they didn't come up as this. They kind of came up as mixed martial artists, and all that. Tell us about, so you said you had your first fight. Tell us about your amateur record, your professional, your decision to go professional, and all that.
I had an undefeated amateur record. I got to, I don't remember what it was, but I knocked off the reigning champion at 135 pounds, and I was actually took that fight with an injury. I had like a ruptured hamstring and calf. Took the fight, felt like crap. There was a moment in the second round where I was sitting in my corner, and I was just so tired. I thought in my head, I'm up 2-0 right now, but I wanted to quit. And I was like, no, I can't do this. I got to bite down. And at that point, it was just mental. No matter how tired I thought I was, as soon as I made that decision, like, no, like, this isn't how I'm going out. Like, I'm winning the next 3 rounds. And then no matter how tired I may have looked, I didn't feel tired. And then my next fight after that, I bumped up a weight class and fought for the 145-pound belt. And I ended up winning that in the first round. And that was the one I fought with a broken leg.
God.
I actually suffered it during training, and I was so scared that somebody was going to tell the promoter, or somebody was going to find out and they were going to pull me off the card. I had just kind of went hiatus and just tried to do as much cardio as I could off my leg. And then everybody's like, hey, where are you at? Like, I haven't seen you at training. I'm like, oh, I'm just cross-training at other gyms. I'm just traveling, But I knew going in that fight I had to get in there and get it over quick. And then I took a year off. I didn't do any training, didn't do any grappling, boxing, nothing. Just took a year off and tried to work a full-time job and see how people actually do that, which I still don't get how people can do that.
Not all of us are as talented as you with our hands and our feet and everything. So I've heard people say, I've heard Rogan say, I remember back in the day, Tito Ortiz was always saying that basically nobody ever gets in the octagon, or in the cage, I guess I should say, because the octagon is specific to the UFC, right? Nobody ever gets in there 100%. And that's kind of what it sounds like you just said. I mean, have you had fights where you were at peak shape and nothing was injured, or is it always kind of little needling things here and there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, because I was in school and I was working a full-time job. Wasn't full-time, but I was getting 40 hours a week. So between that, going to school, and then training, I wasn't training as much, but I was still training. And I don't think I suffered a whole lot of injuries. I did really, really well. But then as soon as I went full bore, just training 3-4 times a day, that's when the injuries started coming along. Okay. So I think it's just a matter of, taking care of your body. And I've always wondered, how a lot of these fighters, at the elite level, how they get by doing this. And it's, obviously they get paid a lot more, and they get a lot, and sponsorships help. Fighters don't necessarily make a whole lot off of their fights. Even in the UFC, fighters normally make more off of their social media content and off of sponsors.
Sure.
I'm still not up to that level. So when it comes to your nutrition and just like the level of training and things like that. That is what I feel like really prevents injuries is being able to be healthy.
Sure.
And being able to afford to be healthy.
This is a topic that I definitely wanted to talk about. I didn't think we'd get there quite yet, but I'm ready to jump into it, about the idea of making money in the fight game. And it occurs to me that people that want to be artists, people that want to be musicians, that a lot of times, probably most of the time, unless you come from money, you wind up having to have some kind of a support job. But then if you could focus full time on your art, your sport, could you advance quicker, or even could there be a point to which you're not going to get there if you're not focusing full time?
I would say 100%. It's the more money you got and the more time you have available, the easier it is to get there. BJ Penn is a famous one. His parents were loaded.
Yeah.
And when he decided he wanted to fight, all he did was train all day, every day, and never had to worry about anything.
He was a monster too.
And he's one of the fastest people to ever get his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's held world title belts in multiple weight classes, especially when he was in his prime. So, and money played a huge factor in that. And I know a lot of other people whose parents either run the gym, or they make, or their parents have a lot of money, so they're able to train more. So, I definitely feel like it plays a huge part.
One of the things that I don't know if you know anything about, but really fascinates me at this moment in political history is the concept of universal basic income. I don't know if you do you know what that is?
I don't.
So I'm a little surprised because you're friends with Cooper, because Cooper actually turned me on to this. But there's one of the candidates running for the Democratic nomination is a guy named Andrew Yang, and he's a business guy, and he's big into this thing. He calls it the Freedom Dividend because it tested better with his when they ran consumer panels. But the idea is every American adult over 18 would get $1,000 a month, just free and clear. And he'll talk about how it sounds so revolutionary, but really Thomas Paine was talking about it at the founding of the country. Martin Luther King was big into it. And the general idea is that it would allow people to pursue things they otherwise wouldn't. So with $1,000 a month, free and clear, a stay-at-home mom like my wife, a musician and film guy like our mutual buddy Cooper, someone like you, this came to mind right away, long before I knew you were coming on. He and I talked about you coming on. I thought, I'm definitely going to ask this guy about UBI, because I think it really feeds in here. So I know you haven't heard about it much. I'm sort of throwing it at you quick, but what would $1,000 extra a month do as a professional athlete? Like, how helpful would that be?
I mean, I honestly don't think it would be very helpful. If anything, I think it would be detrimental. I mean,
it'd be detrimental to you as an athlete to have more money.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, if this money's being given to you, one, and everybody knows that you're going to get it every month, scot-free, I assume everything else, the price is going to rise. They're going to know you're going to have this money, so they're going to raise the price. And also, if you know you're going to get this money, it's just getting given to you, you're not going to want to work as hard. You're not going to, you're going to relax a little bit when really you need to just stay on that grind. You need to keep putting the work in. Some of my best performances, some of my best training, some of my best mindsets have been when I've had nothing. Some of the people that I've found to help me out the most, like a couple of my coaches that I have today, took me in when I had nothing. And if I had something, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at. And so, I mean, that's just kind of how I feel about it. And I feel like
respect.
Not
the answer I was expecting. Respect.
I don't really like anything being given. It's just how I raise. I like everything being earned, or to show that you're at least working for it. And I feel like if you're just sitting on a couch and somebody gives you $1,000, you're not really. It's not deserving, and it's not going to feel as good to have that money.
This is the point of the show, right? So an answer I wasn't expecting, but dude, I could spend the next hour talking this, but I won't. I think everything you just said is one of the considerations that you have to think about. And my guess is that now you and Cooper will be talking about this offline. But I think you have to think about that. However, I would recommend a movie to you called Whiplash. I don't know if you've ever seen it. So J.K. Simmons, who is an incredible actor, won an Academy Award for this movie. And it's at this music school. And the idea, you know who Charlie Parker was?
Yeah.
So he tells this story several times in the movie that when Charlie Parker went to his first rehearsal with this band, he didn't know all of his scales, and they threw a cymbal at him. They were so mad at him, and he went home and he practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, and they drove him so hard, but he became one of the most brilliant jazz musicians in history, right?
Oh, wow.
So then later in the movie, so this J.K. Simmons character, this teacher, he's super hard on people. You even hear about a kid kills himself. He's so hard on him. But later in the movie, the main actor says to him, but don't you think if you push somebody so hard that they won't become this great thing? And J.K. Simmons goes, no, because that's the point. You can't chase away somebody who's great at something by being hard on them.
You can't reach your true potential until you get outside of your comfort zone.
So I think that as I think about the idea of UBI, which I think is so fascinating, something I'd never even heard of until Cooper told me to listen to Yang on Rogan, and now I've binge watched Yang stuff. And it is that there definitely are going to be some people, they're going to sit on the couch and do nothing. But I think there are a lot of people, like I think Cooper is an example, I think you're an example. I don't think you would take that money and just be like, well, now I'm not going to fight, now I'm just going to whatever. First of all, it's not enough money to support you, but it might let you not have that part-time job if you didn't want it. Like, I mean, Cooper might be able to not take some of the smaller video gigs, as an example. So I don't know. Like, I just thought it would be interesting to ask a professional athlete who's trying to get there.
The things I could do with $1,000 a month. Cooper's known me for a long time, and he's seen me live off of $500 a month. He's seen me live off of strictly BioLife donations. So
those are rough times, bro.
I think that it's still rough times.
Anyway, rather than chase this rabbit anymore, like I totally hear what you said, but I think in someone in your position, it could be really interesting. So now we know that Keegan is not voting for Andrew Yang, but that's okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the money thing, and if you don't want to talk about this, like I totally am not going to make you talk about this, but I think is interesting is the idea of unions in MMA. It's actually one of the things that you're going to think I'm like stumping for Yang here, which I'm not. It's actually one of the things that Yang talks about is the UFC and unions. And just like any union story, whenever unions come up, Dana White is really quick to shut it down, immediately, just like car manufacturers did, just like anyone who's been unionized did. But the idea is sort of, when I read about it or hear people talk about it, is that, like you just said, even in the UFC where they're making all this money, the fighters, the actual performers, are not getting paid as much. They've got to rely on sponsors, and then the UFC did the whole thing with the sponsorships and the Reebok thing, and then the social media presence. I mean, would you be in favor of, if there were an MMA union, would you join it? Do you think it's a good idea or a bad idea? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a tough one. I mean, as an MMA fighter, especially the different tiers and the different levels there are, you're considered a prize fighter. So do I think all fighters should get paid the same? No. Do I think all fighters should get paid more? Yes. But, there's definitely, when it comes to like marketing aspect, it's like they're not going to pay somebody who their first fight in the UFC, which they usually give you it's like 10 and 10, so 10 to show up, 10 to win, or something like that, where they're not going to pay you like you're the main event, like you're Conor McGregor or Dustin Poirier or Tony Ferguson. They're not going to pay you millions of dollars to fight when it's your first fight. So do I think everybody should get paid more than $10,000 to show up and $10,000 to win for a lower level? But I do think that there should be different different tiers. And as far as the sponsorship, it looked really bad because you don't get as much you can't show your sponsors as much like individual attention like on your shorts and stuff when it comes to the UFC, but I still can. But I have a couple of buddies that are in the UFC, and they Reebok pays you in sponsorship based off how many fights you have. As far as like that's what I've kind of gathered from them. So if you have 20 fights, you're going to get paid more than somebody who has 10 fights from Reebok. And you can still have your other outside sponsors and endorsements and stuff. You just not while you're in the ring. So it's not a huge thing. But I mean, for a fighter union, I don't necessarily know how I stand. On something like that. I
think that's a fair answer. The other thing that I would say is that if you've never been involved with a union before, so I totally heard what you just said about people getting paid the same. So in my youth, when I was closer to your age, I was in the Actors Union. And so definitely if you're Hugh Jackman and you're doing a play on Broadway, you're going to make more than a nobody doing a play on Broadway. But what they do is they set minimums. So there's a minimum you can make. And then I don't know a ton about it, but like if you're in the electricians union, it's what you're talking about. The journeyman electrician who's at the lowest level, there's a minimum, but then as you have more experience and more time and more so forth, it goes up from there. And then your value goes up. So if you are Anderson Silva, and in your first fight you destroy Chris Lieben, and you immediately get a title shot, and you become this phenom, you're going to rise in that quicker. They can always pay you more, but there are certain things. And then when you're in most unions, they then require other things that are sort of like niceties. So this is a lot of years ago, man. But when I was in the Actors Union, there was an amount of money, but then also there was a health insurance requirement. They had to give you breaks. So like after you couldn't work you for a number of hours without at least a little bit of a break. So there's a couple of things, but there's a trade-off then, because if there's a union and if you're in the union, there's a non-union show. So let's say you were in the union and the only organization that hired union was Bellator and UFC. And King of the Cage calls you and goes, "We want you to fight for the lightweight title." But you're in the union, you can't do that, because if you cross the line and work non-union, you're a scab and you can lose all your union stuff. Now you can't fight in the UFC. So it's a double-edged of that sword. But I was curious if in the community, if you guys ever talk about that, or if you had any thoughts. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think I've known anybody who's talked about it or considered it. I mean, it's just kind of like in the fight business, you're either a prize fighter or you're not. You can either sell tickets, you have a lot of fans, or you don't. It just, I mean, that's just how it goes. I mean, you know what you're going to make going in. You know, if you make weight, you're going to, if you make weight, you're going to get, $10,000 or whatever that is. If you lose, you're not going to get that other 10. But if you win, you get that other 10. So you kind of know what you're going in. It's in the contract. If you show up overweight, you're going to be fined 20% of your purse. It's and it's not like you're working every single day. Yeah, you're training every single day, but it's not like you're working in harsh conditions like most people that are in unions join a union for. So it's a little different, but it's that you gotta make it your own and see as you go. Like I'm still young, and especially in this fight game, there's people who've been fighting for years, and I think I've only been fighting for like 2 or 3 years total. As an amateur and a pro. You
have a very practical mind. I have to say, I like you more and more as the conversation goes along, because you're very matter of fact. Like, I don't want something that I didn't earn. Like, I'm open to the idea of this, but I don't know. Your generation gets bashed a lot for being entitled. You are like the least entitled. What are you, 25, 24?
I turned 25 in December.
So you are one of the least entitled 24-year-olds I've ever met. And that's awesome, man. Like, I love having conversations like this. And we got deep quicker than I really meant to, but I think I love hearing, because I can sit back and I'm never going to fight an MMA fight because I'm a massive pussy and don't want to get hit in the face, But I love the sport. I love what you guys do, and it's cool to sort of, you who are right in the trench, in the cage, to sort of get your take on it. So let's talk about more fun stuff for a second. So break yourself down for us. Like, what are without giving anything away to your opponents, what would you say are your greatest strengths? What are some things you think you're still working on? Like, tell us all about Keegan as a fighter.
I mean, I've grown leaps and bounds in the last year and a half in my striking, which was something I always lacked. I've always been good at, like Taekwondo, so my kicks have always been solid. But letting my hands go is something I hadn't really done. And, but I mean, most people know me as a grappler. I mean, I travel, the U.S. Doing big jiu-jitsu tournaments. I do that 2-3 times a day. I coach wrestling.
Okay.
I've been, wrestling most of my life. So, I mean, as a grappler, I'm pretty well-rounded. And I would say that's what most people know me as.
Okay. What belt are you in, BJJ?
I'm actually a blue belt. So a lot of people think I'm a lot farther along than what I really am. But, there's always reasons that you're being held back. Sometimes it's what they want to see you do, do something else. So they want to see you change. Or, that's why every day after practice or after every promotions, I'm saying, hey, what do I need to work on? What do I need to get better on to get to the next level?
See, that's so awesome. So that's the mindset that you have to have in anything. So never been a professional athlete, but I went to a lot of college. Like, you have to have that mindset of how can I grow? What am I looking to do to get better? Like, I just love that. One of the things that is interesting about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that the school can be very dependent, I think, on on the belt advancement. I remember back when I was watching a ton, the Diaz brothers are under Cesar Gracie, and they used to always say a brown belt under Cesar Gracie would be a black belt anywhere else. But so if you're a Cesar Gracie black belt, you're a badass black belt from the minute you get your black belt. It's not like you...
See, that's a lot of them. Like, a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, unless they wrestled a lot of them don't wrestle. So, like, you already kind of got the upper hand as a wrestler, which is why, like, a lot of tournaments, especially IBJJF, which is like the biggest thing. They if you're if you like had high school or college wrestling experience or anything like that, you're supposed to automatically be a blue belt. So I mean, but your coaches can always kind of do what they want to do. So it's just a waiting game. I mean, a lot of times they call you I've been called a sandbagger. So, when I've traveled, I've like rolled in Texas, and I've rolled in Colorado, and I've rolled in California at different gyms and Salt Lake City. And, I've had people, they're like, when I was white belt, they're like, no way you're a white belt. Now I'm a blue belt. They're like, no way you're a blue belt. And, cause I'm beating people with like higher belts,
Sure.
And, even in my gym now, there's some days, and I just can't wrap my head around like why I'm not getting promoted. But, I know it's just my time. I mean, there's nights when sometimes I go home and I cry just because I'm so mad, because I'm like, and, it's kind of discouraging sometimes when, you don't get that promotion that you think you deserved or you want so bad. There's been times I go home, I cry at night, and I'm like, man, I'm beating these guys that are my size. I'm beating, bigger people. Some people don't even want to go with me. So it kind of sucks and it hurts, but I know that that my coaches, their job is to look out for me and do what's best for me. So I feel like when they know it's my time, or maybe they're waiting for it to be special or something. So that's, it's just a waiting game, and you're gonna put your time in. It's not, you're not a black belt overnight, and a lot of the times, because Midwest is so full of wrestlers and it's so new here, and the black belts that are in the Midwest are so high class. A lot of people say that they hold the Midwest black belts to, jiu-jitsu people do a higher standard than East or West Coast, because the numbers aren't as big in the Midwest. So they really want to make sure you're top notch before they promote you, where, the East and West Coast, a lot of it's just, they just have so many people doing it now that it's just like, okay, you've been doing it for a year, here's your belt. You've been doing it for 2 years, here's your belt. And I don't think that's the case here. I think they really hold you to a higher standard in the Midwest.
I think it's awesome that you admit sort of all the emotions on both sides. Like, you were in the middle of that fight, which I definitely want to talk about, and you sort of had this desire to quit. You talk about sometimes you get so frustrated, your emotions get the best of you, and because to look at you, you're obviously a talented fighter. You're all tatted up. You could definitely whip my ass, and it's like, but sometimes, man, I get so upset and everything. I'm not advancing like I thought I might. I hope that some of my teenage patients, would listen to a thing like this, because I can say all day long it's okay to feel that way, but coming from you, it's going to have so much more impact, and I just think that's awesome. So
And so you're a child psychiatrist?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know this. So in psychiatry, everybody starts with adults, and then you can subspecialize if you want to. So I see mostly young people, but I do see adults as well.
I think I don't know what your take is on it, but I think depression is just kind of like a natural thing. Just to feel down, or to feel mad, or to feel sad, or to feel under pressure, like to feel like you have this pressure built up. I feel like that's normal. People are like, I feel like they say it's more prone now than it was back then, but I just feel like it's normal. There's days when I want to cry just because I've had a stressful day, or I've had a bad training, or I'm broke and I know I got bills to pay tomorrow and I don't know how I'm going to come up with the money.
UBI, man. No kidding.
But it's like, some people be like, oh, well, you're depressed. And I'm just like, no, I'm not depressed. I'm just going through a hard time. Mm-hmm. And, I find instead of being on medication and stuff like that, if I just stay busy, if I just stay positive, if I'm hanging out with friends, or if I love doing puzzles, and I frame them, hang them all over my house.
Nice.
But I like doing puzzles, hunting, fishing, staying busy, hanging out with friends, and doing all sorts of stuff like that. It really kind of takes your mind away from that stress, and the only time that you really feel that pressure is like when you're by yourself. And so I just feel like, if you just stay busy and you stay positive and you just do things that are going to make you happy, it's going to cure depression. Or
huge part of it. So the goal is for me to not talk the whole time, but you just got on a soapbox of mine that I love. So I'm going to address what you said real quickly, because I think it's an important conversation, and I have this conversation with patients all the time. So I agree with everything you just said, but we have to define our terms, all right? So mental health language is used in the day-to-day speak of everybody, so much so that what happens is what's called normalization, all right? So your favorite sports team loses, your favorite fighter gets beaten. You predicted Conor to beat Khabib. I saw you on the internet saying that, all right? You go to work the next day and you're all pissed off and you go, man, I can't believe the Hawkeyes lost. I have prostate cancer today. No, wait, nobody says that. Oh man, I can't believe my girlfriend left me. I have AIDS today. No, wait, nobody says that. What they say is, I feel depressed. So depression is actually two different things. So there's depression, the emotion. So if you got a call right now that your grandma died, it would not be wrong for you to say to me, Adam, man, my grandma died, I'm feeling depressed. That's correct, because depression is an emotion. Then there is major depressive disorder, which is a medical condition where there are chemical imbalances and so forth. Now, with that said, and this is where my profession does not do a good job, is that lifestyle plays a huge factor in all kinds of depression, which is what you just said beautifully. All right. So how is my diet? How's my exercise? Who am I surrounding myself with? Spiritual practice, whether it's a specific religion or meditation or a walk in the woods, that plays a big, big role. So, but there are people at times where there's a chemical imbalance, just like if you said to me, I don't think diabetes is a thing. I think they're eating too many carbs and I think they need to exercise more. I would agree with both of those things. Exercise, good diet has been shown to be, even things like meditation and de-stressing has been shown to be really important when it comes to things like diabetes. But sometimes we have to use a little bit of medicine to get us over the hump. And then ideally, when it comes to something like depression, if you do have the chemical imbalance, you start to change the other things in your life. But sometimes medication can be a bit of a bridge, but it's not an answer. It's a tool to help you get through, just like insulin can be for diabetes. But I agree with you, man. And you have to define the terms, because otherwise we don't tell people with diabetes, hey, just stop having diabetes. Like, suck it up and stop having thyroid disorder. Or like, you know what, how about you try not having testicular cancer today? You know, whereas with mental health, because we use that language like, oh my God, my girlfriend, that bitch is psycho. I mean, so you're throwing around mental health language. Everybody I meet thinks they're bipolar. And even
or they have OCD.
Right. Well, so, oh my God, dude, when I was dating, who is now my wife, she'd be like, oh my God, I'm so OCD because I clean the house like once a week. And I actually had to say to her, you got to stop saying that, because I've had patients try to kill themselves that have real OCD. And I was going to bring this up near the end, but dude, you're leading it so well. I want to give you, at the end of your fight, when you fought Jepsen, you gave a shout out for people that they're suicidal. And last night I was watching it. That was so awesome. And I knew I had to bring it up because I work with people like that. And I thought that was so cool that you did that.
Yeah, that's just, that's just like, I feel like, you know, as growing up, you know, you're never going to be happy with nobody's ever perfectly happy with their body.
Right.
And I feel like some people just dwell on it too much. And that was something I kind of did, you know, and it was like, oh, you know, this didn't go my way, I want to die, or, you know, this blah, blah, blah. And I feel like that happens to a lot of people. Or I lost a wrestling match, I can't show my face, I want to die. You know, it's like, and then, you know, you just kind of realize, like, how precious life is when you see friends pass away at such a young age. Or, you know, and then you come to appreciate it, and you're like, you know what, you know, I mean, you know, there's been times when I've been like, oh, I want to die. And, you know, now I'm like, oh, you know, if I would have killed myself, would I have been the person I am now? No. If you know, a lot of the reasons why I was like, oh, I want to die, or, you know, those thoughts were even in my head, was because I wasn't happy with myself. Because everybody else was maturing faster than I was. And now I'm literally almost ideally, other than me being a little bit short, but ideally I'm like almost exactly what I pictured myself I was going to be, but I wasn't there when I wanted to be there. And like, you know, everybody kind of grows at a different rate. Time happens, you know, money's going to come and go, you know, when it is. But it's just like, I just wasn't happy with myself. And, you know, so those thoughts were in my head, but it's like, man, it's like, dang, if I would have died, you know, like I would never give myself a chance. So I feel like people just need to give themselves that chance. And it might not always work out, and it might not work out when you think it's going to, but, you know, I just feel like that you got to wait, you got to hold out, and just try your best to stay positive as much as you can. And you know, bad things are going to happen, and sometimes you just need a shoulder. You just need somebody to talk to. You need a shoulder to lean on. And back when I had Facebook and I was like pretty active on it after that speech, I had a lot of people who felt like they didn't have anybody to turn to. They didn't have anybody to talk to about the problems that they were going on in life, and just the amount of messages that were like just flooding in of people just wanting to talk, just to hear them out.
Totally.
And asking me, you know, how I kind of got through those thoughts, and how I kind of just you know, overcame it. And it's, just even, without having a doctor help you or like medication, just having somebody to talk to is always nice. Like even a therapist, there's times I don't want to, bitch and complain to my girlfriend or my mom or whatever, but I can bitch and complain to a therapist because she can't judge me. She's not there to like tell anybody. So it's not, it's always nice. I always say like a therapist is always kind of cool to talk to. I just think people just need to appreciate life a little bit more and just kind of and ride out the journey. It's a rough road, and I don't really know like what to say else about it other than you just gotta stick through it. So
absolutely no bullshit. When you decide you don't want to be a fighter anymore, you should really consider becoming a therapist. First of all, teenage boys respond better to male therapists in my experience. So no haters need to like tweet me that I'm a sexist asshole for saying that. It's my experience. What you just said is so critical. I was a therapist before I was a doctor. So I come into psychiatry from a very pro-therapy background. And if you look at the research, therapy is by far the best treatment. And I have a lot of people that choose therapy without medicine, and I'm fine with that. I always tell patients, I'm not your drug dealer. My goal is to help you. And what you just said is so important. Different roles for people to play. You can't always be venting to your mom, your girlfriend, your buddies, or so forth. They're trained differently. They have different roles in their lives.
And it just puts stress on them that they don't need to worry about.
But therapy is so important. And I'm not kidding you, man. Hearing you talk about the outpouring and so forth, it would be, you have the heart for it. And you'd be really great at it.
My goal, not a lot of people know this. I've been coaching for a while, but right now there's just so many young fighters coming out that are so well-rounded, and a fighter's prime isn't until they're like 30, 32. But the goal is you want to get paid for the amount of work that you're putting in, for the amount of effort you're putting in, for the time, and I think I'm only going to do I'm still always going to train and still compete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But I think I'll probably stop fighting after about 5 or 6 more fights. I think then, I won't step in the cage to actually fight anymore. I'll just coach and corner, because that gives me enough time to fight for another 2.5 years. And by that time, if I'm 27 and I'm not already signed by a big promotion, they're not going to sign me because there's going to be all these new up-and-comers that are 19 years old who already have 8 fights under their belt that are ready to go, that can be in that promotion for a long time.
Sure.
And so, like, after that, I want to coach. I would love to be able to open up a big gym, a big facility, but I want to coach because I feel like as a coach, I can be that therapist. I can be that open door that they can talk to, and I can give them the advice that I've seen, that I've used, my experiences. I can help them, as well as I can shape them into the man that they should be, or the girl that that they need to grow up to be a good person, to be a contributing member of the society, to not be lazy, and and to keep them in shape. Because if they have somebody they can trust and somebody that they rely on, it's a lot easier for them to stay in shape, and and I can kind of put an end to the bullying. You see bullying and stuff in sports a lot, but it's like as a coach, I've seen coaches that didn't step up and do their job, and I know now that like from watching their mistakes, I can step up and I can do that job. I feel like bullying is another thing that really contributes to like depression.
It's
this whole time it's like, oh, I want to die because every day I go to school I get picked on, or people are always talking crap about me, or they're talking about this or that, and and then it's like, you get out of high school, you get out of grade school, and it's like, it kind of stops. I mean, yeah, you have people talk trash and just being assholes every now and then, but it's nothing like this is in grade school, because now that I'm a professional fighter, it's like all those people that used to pick on me, they want to be my friends now, and they're like, oh, okay, hey, I want to go to your fight, and it's like, part of me is like, oh, fuck you, dude, like you fucking made my life miserable when I was younger, but now it's like, okay, you know what, I'm over it, you're cool, as long as you support me, that I'm cool with it, the past is the past, And it's like, and it's satisfying knowing that like I'm doing the best I can to be happy every day. And yeah, I might be broke, but I'm not miserable. I have a few good friends. I have a girlfriend. I have dogs. I have a roof over my head. I'm fighting. I'm training. I'm doing things that make me. I'm hunting. I'm doing things that make me happy and that I love. And I'm watching girls from my high school or friend group. They're hooked on meth now, or they're pregnant and their life, and they don't know what they're doing, or they have a kid and their parents are the ones watching the kid all the time because they still want to party because they don't want to ruin their youth. It's like, it's karma. I'm not a big believer in that kind of stuff, but you hear people say it all the time, but it's just like, you were an asshole in grade school, you're an asshole in high school, and it bit you in the ass as soon as you became an adult.
Does seem like energy comes back like that, dude. There's so much good stuff.
It's never created nor destroyed.
Right. So Keegan Witbeck, physicist. There's so much good stuff to unpack there, and
call me Tyson.
I would be
Neil DeGrasse.
I would, yeah, dude. So if anyone knows Neil deGrasse Tyson, please have him come on the show. But anyway, I would be remiss, and my wife will throw me out of the house if I don't mention at this point. So my father-in-law in Fairfield, Iowa, coached every little league team of every sport for like 40 years. And everyone in that town knows him and loves him, and the amount of lives that he changed you can't even count. And so I definitely, that's what I'm talking about, man. You have a heart for stuff like that. I got to be honest, like, we still have plenty of time, but I thought we were going to be, kicking around like who's the best fighter. I still want to talk about that, but like, this is such an awesome conversation. I think opening the gym is completely something you can do. It's refreshing to hear somebody really talk about this, and the fact that you've been to these dark places, that's where that realness comes from. And I can tell you, especially when you're working with young people, you can bullshit them a little bit, but there comes a point where they can see through you, and there's a lot of people that kind of go into it and they're kind of fake about it, and then the kids will eat them alive. But you've been there, you've seen that. Literally just today, I was talking to a high school kid in the office and was saying what you just said, which is, because there's so much bullying, we're seeing classic PTSD symptoms with bullying. I see it every day, and they feel dark. They want to hurt themselves, kill themselves. And what I keep saying to them is, as somebody who's more than 20 years out of high school, if I could just make you understand that 5 years, 10 years out of high school, none of that's going to matter. To kill yourself over that is just, it's so tragic that there's hardly even words for it. And you can come at them at a certain way as coach, different than I come at them as physician, both valuable, but this is how we break the stigma. That's what I'm talking about with the mental health language too, because there's a stigma. It's hands across America for breast cancer, it's hands across America for HIV. And then it's, oh my God, I couldn't possibly talk about my mental illness. And the answer is not less acceptance for the other ones. The answer is more acceptance for the mental health part. And the only way we're going to get there is talking about it. And when celebrities talk about it, people listen more. So I can shout from the rooftops. I actually exchanged emails years ago with Ken Shamrock. We were talking about, when I first got to Iowa, we were talking about doing a study on depression in professional athletes, specifically fighters, who they get so into the fame and the accolade and the spotlight and the training aspects, and then the career only lasts so long. And then what do I do, and who am I? And we see it in bodybuilders a lot too, when they can't compete. So it's talking about it is absolutely the key. So keep doing what you're doing, because it's just awesome, man. I'm so happy we're having this conversation.
Well, there's Ariel Helwani. He's a big sports MMA fighter journalist. He just posted on his Instagram, he did like a little talk with Dominic Cruz, and Dominic Cruz basically kind of touched base right there on how Henry Cejudo, he's always been a champion his whole life, and all he knows is competing and being held up on this pedestal and just coddled. And he's like, what is he going to do when he can't fight anymore? Like, he's not going to know who he is. And I thought that was like kind of a cool thing, because these people just put so much time into just one thing. And like I like to say, I do more things in one day than most people do an entire week. I hunt, I fish, I'm taking my dog for a walk, I'm in the gym, I'm training, I'm doing multiple different martial arts in one day. And it's like, some people just get so zoned in on one thing to think, oh, that's all I can do, that's all I have to do. And it's just like, no, you do what makes you happy at that moment. And so, I thought that was a cool thing. And in one of my post-fight speeches, I said, I just want to get well enough known and win, just so I can, my main goal to win is like what gets me through the fight is like, if I lose, I can't give that speech. If I lose, I don't get the mic. And I want them to hear what I have to say. I want people to know, what I have to say. And, so I just wanted to kind of build up that pedestal. That way, one day if I, it looks good on a coaching resume, and it looks good if I'm trying to open up a gym. People are going to be like, oh, he has experience and he knows what he's talking about. I just kind of want to be that person that, like, when I pass away, they're like, that guy made a difference, and he was a good person. So, and you never know when that's going to happen. So you got to do it every single day.
Keegan is a philosopher and a poet. That was beautiful.
I'm a lot more things.
Hopefully,
sometimes I'm an asshole.
Dude, every interesting person in the history of the world is an asshole at different times. Isaac Newton, probably the smartest man to ever live, was a raging asshole. There's so many interesting stories about that, but I digress. Listen, man, I hope that this show gets big as well as you get big, and I love your spirit, man. We're gonna help you as much as we can. Like, I'm already a fan now. I don't care if it's one more fight or 10. Like, I'm gonna be watching. Let's see if we can't. I love talking about this, but let's see if we can't lighten it up just for a minute.
We got pretty deep there.
Listen, it's awesome. This is the kind of stuff that needs to be out there, but at the same time, we don't want people, breaking into the booze and drinking too much after all this deep stuff. So, the fights. So I want to know about some of your favorite fighters, some of your influences. I'm worried I'm not going to say it. That fight against Jepsen, you dominated all 5 rounds, clearly strong on the ground. You're being self-deprecating, like, oh, my hands, my whatever. You landed some excellent shots in that fight. It was fun to watch you, and that was a couple years ago. And then the only other one I was able to see that was more recent was your pro debut, where you just whipped the guy's ass in the first round. But I mean, so who are some of your influences? Who are some of your favorites? Who do you look up to?
Growing up, I kind of liked watching Matt Hughes fight. Because he was a wrestler and I was a wrestler, and
he's an Iowa boy too, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, he trained out of Militich, but he's from Illinois.
Quad Cities over in that area, right?
So I was a big fan of those guys, and
that was a badass camp. It was Hughes and Sylvia and some of those people coming out of Militich.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
And then I was kind of, I've been a fan of like John Jones and stuff. I mean, necessarily I admire these people as fighters, but not necessarily the things that they do outside of the cage.
Right.
I mean, I'm not a perfect person either. I mean, I've been arrested and I went to jail before too, but it's like,
you gotta tell that story.
I was gonna say, let me finish your thought. Maybe we hear that story.
You gotta hear about some of these like street fights.
But
okay. Kimbo Slice.
Oh man, it's crazy.
But yeah, so those are kind of the guys I looked up to, and then me being like a southpaw, and then like just being able to sell tickets and trash talking a little bit here and there. I really liked Conor McGregor and stuff because I like dressing up. I like to dress up and wear like suits and ties, and I have a whole I used to have a walk-in closet just to dress clothes. I had to hook up when I worked at Men's Warehouse. But yeah, so I kind of liked his style, and I had a little beard, and I had like that top knot, and I'd wear a suit, and so people always would be like, "Hey, you're Conor McGregor." So those were kind of like my influences, and that's kind of what got me going, I guess.
Yeah. There's obviously you don't want to emulate one person's style too much, because that may not be kind of what works in your body, or what's appropriate for that opponent. Something you were talking about earlier that it made me think about MMA in general. You were talking about the belts in BJJ and how it's different in the different gyms. The one thing about MMA is you can. So I mean, I could buy a belt on the internet right now. Now that would make me a horrible poser and a fraud, but you get in that cage, the blue belt who should be a purple belt. The guy could say he's a black belt. He could be a black belt, but that doesn't mean you're not going to beat him. And it's an interesting sport because so like my sister was big into triathlon, and I used to do triathlons and everything. And you can buy your way a little bit. Like you can't buy your lungs, but you can get a badass bike if you can afford it, and you're going to shave time off doing that. Man, you get into that cage. You can say that you're a black belt double whatever in kung fu or tai chi. You gotta, but in comes Keegan and whips your ass, and you lost. So I mean, it's almost like a great equalizer in a way inside that cage. I think that's one of the things Hoist Gracie really showed.
Well, I like Joe Rogan always posts those fake martial arts videos where these people claim that they're like these black belts, and they have these like cults where they.
They don't even touch the person,
and then they're like
do
falling
all that
over.
Stuff.
But no, I feel like as a true mixed martial artist, you don't really go out and look for a whole lot of problems. Like if you're talking trash to promote a fight. You're usually not out there trying to stir stuff up. You're not trying to fight people at the bar. You're not trying to fight people at the street. Most of my, the fights I was in like high school and stuff like that, it was like, because I was being bullied or, I was sticking up for somebody. Like somebody's trying to pick on my friend. They call him a faggot because he's gay, and he's not going to be able to defend himself. And so I'm like, you know what, dude, I'll whoop your ass. That's this type of person I am. Like, apologize. Oh, you don't want to apologize? Okay, well, you got 3 seconds, otherwise I'm jaw checking you. That's just kind of how I was. But you get in too much trouble, and then once you hit 18, it's not old school anymore. You
remember that shit that went down with my roommates?
Yeah.
I called him right away.
Oh, I'm going to start calling him from now on. Are you kidding me?
Bro,
I get in a fight with my wife. I'm going to text him. Are you kidding me?
I got some dirty work.
But yeah, I mean, most of my, martial artists, like real ones, aren't going out looking for a fight. They're not egging fights on.
Right.
You'll see them. They'll be calm. They'll tell you, hey, dude, you need to chill out. Or they'll be like, hey, man, I'm a trained fighter. That person doesn't want to calm down. They make the wrong move. They're getting slept, or they're getting their arm broke, or they're getting choked out. And that's how you know the difference is, like, they're not really going to look for it if they're a real martial artist. And most of the couple times I've been arrested, or like I've gotten charged with something, I've always kind of gotten a break from the judge because of the situation. Sure. It was like wrong place, wrong time. Somebody says, hey, can you come pick me up from the bar? I just get off work, show up to the bar, I see some kid getting jumped outside the bar by 5 people. I go to break it up and I get sucker punched. Next thing you know, I'm dropping 5 guys. Drunk or not, or it's like, I'm a big respect guy. If you don't like me, you can pull me behind closed doors. You can be like, dude, I think you're a bitch. I think you're whatever mean name, anything you want to call me. I'll be like, okay, this is your opinion, but don't ever call me out in front of a bunch of people. Because I think that's the most disrespectful thing you can possibly do. Like, you can respect somebody and not like them.
Absolutely.
And so it's like, if you say something to me, I'm going to give you a couple warnings out in public. And then, if you keep, it's like you don't shake a cage or you don't corner an animal, know. So then I feel like if you're coming at me like that, you're trying to stir something up, and you got to shut it down. I mean,
you ever see the video of Roger Huerta? You remember Roger Huerta?
Mm-mm.
So Roger Huerta was the first MMA fighter. See if you can find it. He was the first MMA fighter to be on the cover of, I think it was ESPN magazine or Sports Illustrated. He was Roger Huerta, spelled with an H. I think it's probably H-E-U. He was this badass lightweight. He should have gotten a title shot, and he somehow fell out with the UFC. And something happened, and he wound up leaving the UFC. I think there was a contract dispute. But there's a video of him going, and people were picking on somebody at a bar outside the bar. I think some big dude slapped a woman or something. And he's this 155-pound soaking wet guy, and this great big guy. And Roger Huerta just whipped the shit out of him. Yeah, here it is. So for those of you that are listening, we're watching this TMZ video. We can't show it because YouTube will get mad at us. But so there he is, Roger Huerta, former first number 1 contender in the lightweight division of the UFC. Must not be. Oh, there we go. That guy's got at least 150 pounds on him.
He takes off running.
Of course.
Well, that's, it's flight or fright. There's some people who are going to run away from situations like that, and some people they feel like it's their duty to step up. And I mean, I always kind of felt like that was was my job.
You made an important point that I think you have to think about, whether it's your job or not. But you have to think about that. If you and I get in a fight right now, it's potentially a felony, and like you don't want to wind up, because like, I'm a fighter, I'll take any fight anytime or whatever. But like in the certain situations, you don't want to wind up getting in too much trouble, because that can really negatively affect your future and so forth. Yeah. It's
because they kind of hold you like as a fighter. There's not a whole lot of like, oh, my hands are registered. You hear a lot of people say that. Like,
put my hands in my pocket.
Yeah, that's not really a thing. But the courts do hold you kind of to a higher standard. But no, there was also another video kind of like that. I don't exactly know for sure who it was. I think it was Randy Couture. But a guy was getting crazy in a bar trying to fight a bunch of people and started hitting people.
Serra.
Oh yeah, it was Matt Serra. Yep, and he puts the dude in a chokehold and then has.
The guy's freaking out.
Yeah, has him like.
Just got his wrist.
He literally just has his wrist. He's on him full mount, just holding him as this guy's like freaking out. And but that's like the difference between I always say there's like there's trained fighters, there's scrappers, and there's people who think they can fight.
Yeah.
And this is a video.
Nice. Former UFC welterweight champion.
The guy's like screaming and shit.
Matt Serra.
Calm down.
For those of you that are listening again, we've got Matt Serra, the former welterweight champion. This guy is just drunk off his ass, but he's got him he's sitting in full mount, just holding his wrists. I mean, and the Serra brothers are both incredible Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, and something that I was meaning to say earlier. So I've taken like maybe 5 BJJ classes in my life, and because I have this weird thing with my floating rib on the side of my oblique, where like I think it took like 4 lessons in medical school. That got hurt. I moved to Iowa City, went to the Iowa City BJJ thing. First class there, same thing, got hurt. It just took a while to heal, and by then I got so busy in residency I didn't go back. But
you just gotta let them harden. Get calcium built up. He
was talking to you about, like, I was sort of looking into it again. The thing that I think I don't want to plagiarize from people, but I've heard people say that BJJ has a douchebag filter because you're going to get the shit kicked out of you for a while. And if you have this big ego to where you can't take that, you're never going to make it in that. And so for me, I remember my first class, they wouldn't let the white belts roll together because they were afraid we were going to kill each other. But I had to roll with the teacher. I'd never seen anybody with that kind of hip control, and like it was so awesome and yet irritating just to get my ass handed to me over and over and over again. That it was like, this is really cool.
It's crazy how calm they can stay, and like a lot of times like I roll with like my eyes closed with like new people, and they'll be like, "How are you doing this?" Like you just gotta you gotta feel, and especially with yoga, like instructors like black belts and stuff. You might think, oh, I got him right now. Like, oh, I'm going to get out, or oh, I'm going to get him this time. But in reality, they've already put 5 moves together, and they're 20 moves ahead of you.
Yeah, totally. It's chess with a master. I think it's such an interesting sport. The other thing, too, is like you, I grew up doing taekwondo, and I was a black belt in taekwondo. And, when we sparred, you were only supposed to hit people so hard. You didn't do headshots, obviously. You didn't do elbows. But in BJJ, when you roll, you in theory can go 100%, because with grappling, the worst thing that's going to happen is, because you're probably not going to break some dude's arm. You might in the cage because if he won't tap. But in a BJJ thing, you're probably not going to. So you choke somebody out and they go to sleep for a minute. They sort of wake back up. You can go harder than you can with something like that. At least it seems to me in the little bit that I took. So
right, and it's like it's humble. It's like humbling. Yeah, okay, I can go to sleep. Like me, like I always think this thing was like, I'll never like tap to a choke, because you never know that split second when you're about to tap, you could pop out. You
mean in a fight or in training?
Either.
Dude, you're hardcore.
But I will tap to a joint lock. You know,
Right.
if it's an arm bar or something that can seriously hurt me, 'cause I'm just going to wake back up in 10 seconds if
Right.
I get choked out. But, you know, when it comes to like ligaments and,
Sure.
you know, bones, stuff like that, that's a completely different story. So those, you know, and you have to be smart. You know, like Joe Rogan once said, jiu-jitsu is like, when you're rolling, it's like, oh, I killed the guy 100 times, and, you know, in a couple minutes. And it's like, you know, like reality, you're like, I got you. It's like it's like you got to tap, or you know, I could seriously hurt you.
Absolutely.
And people kind of, you know, catch on to that. So I think that's really, like, that's really cool.
You mentioned BJ Penn on one of the Ultimate Fighters where he was the coach. Some of the guys were talking about, like, I'm never going to tap. I'm never going to tap. Never going to tap. And BJ Penn said, look, man, you know, if he breaks your right arm, you're wiping your ass with your left hand for at least 6 months. So you might want to think about that. And here's, like you say, one of the greatest, one of the fastest to black belt. He won the Mundials or whatever it was when he was, you know, he's only been doing it a little bit. I mean, that's a badass fighter for sure. All right, so who in your opinion is the greatest fighter of all times in MMA? You can give me a couple if you want to. I hate questions like that where it's like, pick one, pick a few.
The greatest fighter in MMA. I would say Demetrius Johnson would have to be one. John Jones definitely one. You know, like Anderson Silva is always going to be a great. But I think it's hard to say like who's the greatest of all time. But those are definitely.
Those are three of your favorites.
Yeah.
All the questions I thought I would stump you on, I didn't think that'd be the one you had to think about that much. So Anderson Silva was my favorite until he got all weird. And I heard Joe Rogan once say, never say anything about a fighter you wouldn't say to their face. So I adored Anderson Silva. From the minute he destroyed Chris Lieben, I knew he was something different. His fights with Rich Franklin. But then he was so good. He got to that point where he was doing all that weird stuff and he would drop his hands and do all that.
Rich Franklin is actually probably one of my favorite fighters. So
Franklin seemed like a really cool guy, but man, Silva just, oh God, what he did to his face with his knees. I would also I agree with the people you said, I would throw into the conversation George St. Pierre.
Yeah, I would say
George St. Pierre to me was one of those people who he first of all he had a karate background, which is interesting, you know, but he was one of those people that was training everything. He was really well rounded. He was doing boxing with Freddie Roach. He was training with Greg Jackson, and he went and trained with the Canadian Olympic wrestling team to up his game. And he really struck me. And this is don't kick my ass for saying this, man. But so you actually mentioned it. There are different kinds of fighters. Like to me, there's the kind of. There's a stereotype, and one of the things I was going to talk to you about is, you know, the people that don't know anything about MMA, it's getting better in the mainstream, but it's like, oh, they're just a bunch of animals, and it's cockfighting. You know, I think it was John McCain that famously called it human cockfighting. You know, they're the people that talk a lot of trash, and the Diaz brothers, who are amazing fighters, but they talk a lot of trash. Conor talked a lot of trash. Chael Sonnen talk a lot of trash. But George St. Pierre always seemed to be super classy. Everything that he did, he's bowing to his opponents. I'll bet you've heard the Rogan podcast. He's so well spoken. He talked about something too that I wanted to talk to you about, which is, as somebody who's up and coming, how do you make the decisions of who to fight? Because he said something again I always thought of, which is, they try to hype up the fights and they go, at the end it's like, well, you won, but Dustin So said they'd kick your ass, and George St. Pierre would go, what they want me to go is, bring me this guy, I'll destroy whoever I want. But you have to be smart about, how many fights do I take, how often, how is the matchup? First of all, do you have a manager or something like that, or how do you get approached for a fight, and then what thought process do you go through of, am I going to take this?
So I just basically self-manage myself. I kind of went to school for management and all that kind of stuff. So I've always just self-managed myself. I know what I'm worth. I know what a lot of other people get paid. So I've done that for the most part. I try to fight every 3 months. I try to fight 3 times a year is my goal.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like...
Have you ever turned down a fight thinking either it wasn't the right time, it wasn't a good matchup?
No, nope. I've had a lot of opponents pull out of fights against myself. I mean, almost every one of my opponents has had way more fights than I have, by a long shot. They've all had 10 plus fights other than my first fight. I was like, okay, I'm here one fight at a time and just seeing where I'm at. And, I kept winning. And then I don't remember my first professional opponent. I can't remember how many fights he had, but he had more than I did. I think he had a few or something like that. And I went in there just like, okay, I'm just gonna, do what I know how to do. I wanted to stand up because I just kind of wanted to work on that a little bit, and
Tell me your last fight?
My first fight as a pro. Kind of show him where I'm at, and then my last fight, I because I beat somebody who had multiple fights under his belt, pro. So I was like, okay, you know what? I don't want to take another fight against somebody who's 1-1 or 0-1 or something like that. I was like, I want to see where I'm at against people who have more experience, who have been doing it for years. And so I took a fight against somebody who had 15 professional fights under his belt, and it was kind of a short notice fight.
Okay. What was his record, and how long ago was that fight?
That fight was in April.
Okay.
I think he was 7-9 or something like that.
Okay.
Or 9-7. It was something like that. He had a decent amount of experience, and he was a striker. So I was like, you know what? That's what I want to test. I want to test myself in the striking, and he has a lot of experience, and so I want to give it a try. And I fell short, so I lost by a close decision. And that's also one of those things, is not ever experiencing a loss, like that. It's a lot of fighters don't bounce back from it, and
I was going to ask about that.
That kind of I was ready to go in the next day. When they said the fight was over, I was telling my coach, get me ready, let's go. I want to keep fighting. And they're like, dude, the fight's over. I was like, shit, I'm not even tired. Let's keep going. And
talk us through that fight a little bit. That's one that we weren't able to kind of find the footage for online, but was it unanimous decision? Break down your performance for us a little bit. Do you think the judges were right? I mean, what do you think?
I think it was a split.
I've got it right here for any of it.
Yeah, I think it was a split decision. It was just I think the I think the judges got it right.
Okay.
It was close. He even thought it could have possibly went either way, but if I could have possibly just secured a better a takedown, and there was a couple of chances where I should have got a submission and I didn't.
You tried.
But yeah, no, there's a couple of things I didn't capitalize on, and I didn't cut corners and get the angles like I should have, especially against somebody who's a little bit lankier and a lot better boxing experience, and I just tried to stand toe to toe with him.
And you can see too that he knows you're a grappler, right? Because he's keeping his hands down at his nipple level, probably trying to think about stuffing the takedown versus protecting his head.
See, he kept trying to throw a bunch of those low kicks. I kept checking. I just kept smiling and laughing at him.
Yeah. What's it like mentally to experience a loss and then try to come back from that? Because like you said, there's a big thing you hear the top level commentators talk about. How does somebody come back from a loss? You never lost as an amateur. That was your first loss, not as a professional ever. You've now, in theory, got a fight coming up soon. Where are you mentally, and how do you come through that, man?
I love watching these fights when it's when you're talking to each other in the cage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was a close fight, and I feel like it just really, really, there was a lot of things. It kind of was a bad card. A lot of fights got pulled out. Not the entire athletic commission was there, so one referee had to referee 12 fights. They didn't have anybody checking you at ringside. So I had multiple people saying that he was greased up, and I totally thought he was greased up, because I've never had anybody, I train, with half-naked men every day, sweaty, and never having to worry about people just slipping out of my takedowns. And he was slipping out of him pretty well, and he grabbed the cage a couple times, but you know, you never know what you do. I mean, it's part of the game, and you know, you just got to learn from it. And you know, the way I looked at it is, I lost, but if I would have won, I would have been like, oh, I got nothing to work on. I just got to, you know, I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. And you know, now I was like, okay, well, instead of throwing 1 and 2 punch combos, I need to throw 3 and 4 punch combos. I need to, you know, pivot this way. You know, I need to cut angles. You know, get in and out instead of, because most of the time you just capitalized on it was, I would throw a punch or two and then I'd get in and I'd back out. And after he caught on to that, he would just follow me as I was backing out. So I mean, I feel like I learned a lot just from that, even though it was close. And I know it was so close, so I could have secured one, you know, one takedown, I could have got him. And
that answer doesn't surprise me, having watched a couple of your fights, because you seem to have a good head on your shoulders, like what I think they call like the fighter IQ. You know, watching you again in that 5-round fight against Jepsen, you clearly had a game plan. You were able to execute. The fact that you can say, okay, you know, I had a loss, and here are some things that I did. I think that's going to serve you really well. So on the books, at least, you have a fight coming up pretty soon, but I think you said your opponent got medically disqualified for that, but they might find somebody else. But regardless of when your next fight is, do you think that having the loss be the last thing you did, is that going to fire you up? Is that going to get in your head? What do you think?
I mean, obviously you kind of think about it, but I don't feel like it's something that that is going to affect me. It's just like it kind of gives you that drive, because you're like, I don't want to have that feeling again. And it more so wasn't like even me having that feeling, because I know it's win or learn. It's never win or lose. But it's just seeing my friends and my family and just disappointment. It's you know, like seeing my sister cry, or seeing my girlfriend cry, or my mom cry. It's like they're not used to me losing. They're not used to me, you know, being in a war. So it's like, you know, when they do see that, it really gets to them. You know, it's like they're used to it, but it's like, you know, they feel that pain that I'm feeling mentally.
You're a deep dude. I like this. Win and learn, not win and lose, is a T-shirt to put on the website. No, that's awesome. No, I think again that's your mindset is just I think it's just amazing. You know, and I think you have to think, like you say, you have to have a piece of that, right? Because if it's just like, oh, the judges robbed me, or you know, but then if you went too far, like, oh my God, like that guy beat me, what's going to happen? You second guess yourself. You don't go for the double leg. You don't throw your hands. We've seen it happen in the UFC.
Well,
right? People come back shaken, and they're never the same again.
Well, and I know I was talking to there's brothers out of Cedar Rapids. One of them was potentially, you know, he had the potential to be in the UFC and be a champion, but he retired. And his brother's name is Eric Koch, so it's Keone Koch and Eric Koch. They run Hard Drive Performance Center up there, and Eric is currently a UFC fighter. He's like one of like 2 or 3 people to win in 3 different weight classes.
Oh, cool.
But you know, when we were talking about that, he's like, well, you know, they were like, you know, it's a good gauge on where you're at. You know, you beat somebody who had, you know, like 5 pro fights under him. You know, so be it. So now you know where you're at there. But then you took a fight with somebody who had, you know, he's been fighting since 2012, and he has 15 pro fights under his belt. And you lost a close decision. So now I know kind of where I'm at in there. So, you know, it's kind of a nice gauge or two. But
I think there's a piece in there as well. I totally get what you're saying. It's a very logical approach. One of the things I think is difficult about fighting is that, you know, in mathematics, I'm going to totally nerd out for a second. You know, there's what they call the reciprocal property. So if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then A is greater than C. That's not true in the fight game. And this is what I was talking about a little bit earlier about trying to pick the quality fights. So if you had 5 professional fights, but they were all against top UFC fighters, that's different than if you had 5 professional fights against bums at the bar. You know, and so when I was growing up in Des Moines, the local group was called Midwest Cage Championships. And I used to go watch their stuff. I actually wrote an MMA column for the Drake school paper when I was there, and I loved watching their things. And they had several good fighters. Jeremy Stevenson was there for a while, and then he became a UFC fighter.
Stevens, yeah.
Jeremy Stevens, you're right, Jeremy Stevens. And he was in Des Moines, and then he moved to California. But I got to see him. Josh Neer, the dentist, he was always kind of around there, and he's been in and out of the UFC. There was a guy that when I first began to sort of think about the business side of it, that it occurred to me with this fight selection, and he was their champion for a while. His name was John the Minivan Van Mikkel. And I remember looking at his SureDog stats, and the guy had over 100 fights. And he would talk a lot, like I was saying, like, I'll fight in any weight class, anybody, anytime. So he had like 100 fights, but you'd look at the dates on it. He was fighting like every weekend in different weight classes.
Right.
And the thing is, like, I get it. You can make some money. You're a tough guy. That guy could totally kick my ass. Like, I'm not talking down to him, but as a business person, if I think about if you want to get into the UFC,
health-wise, it's not smart.
Well, and I definitely want to talk about CTE and all that, and definitely. But like, so yes, but from the business standpoint, if he had protected his record a little bit more, like if that guy wants to get into the UFC, but they're going to announce him and go, he's 61 and 56 or whatever. I mean,
right.
like you threw yourself out there so much that if you would have taken a little bit more time to train and grow and sort of manage your career a little bit better, it occurs to me that if your goal is to fight in whatever at any time, that's different than I want to be in Bellator, I want to be in the UFC. It occurs to me that that's true.
It's hard to get in the UFC with a loss in your record now.
With any loss?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, unless you're like 12-1, but if you're 5-1, it's going to be really hard to get back in there unless you get on a contender series and win it. But it's going to be hard. And I'm sorry, do you mind if I use the restroom?
No, go for it. Absolutely.
It should take like a couple seconds.
No, it's fine. I mean, that's, again, this is the beauty of having our studio be here.
I'll be right back.
So,
check.
Yeah. Yeah. So just right over there.
Go down the hall into that room.
Yeah.
And then all the way around the corner.
So this is an awesome conversation. I have to say I have so much stuff that I wrote down to talk about that almost feels like kids play.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know we were going to go so deep so fast. But what a great conversation.
No, he's a great dude. I mean, him and I, we weren't really close in like high school and stuff. He used to have a crazy look, bro. He used to have piercings all over his face and shit, and I was like, this guy looks like a psycho. Like, and then
here's that language. No, I'm kidding.
He was actually he was bartending downtown, and I was out one night, and he had just moved to Iowa City, and I was out with a couple friends, and he shouted I heard somebody yell my name, and he was like, Cooper. I turned around, I was like, oh, what's up, bro? And him and I had never really even been friends. And he hit me up. He was like, bro, I just moved to Iowa City. I don't know anybody. Like, what's up? And I was like, we swapped numbers and then started hanging out. And, bro, he's so funny. Like, I'll go. He's got this shitty little acoustic guitar at his crib, so I'll go over there and play. And he swears to God that he's like the next American Idol and he's the next
guy?
Eminem. Oh,
nice.
Yeah, but you can't. He says he's everything, bro.
Come on back in.
Am I allowed back?
Yeah, no, dude, are you kidding? So we just found out from Cooper that you want to be the next Eminem. You gonna drop some lyrics for us?
Oh, I can spit some bars.
So here, get the regular mic back on. The noise in the background.
Put the mic on.
For those of you listening, while Keegan prepares to rap for us, is some of our observers, some of the entourage that came to see the Golden Boy here. Are gonna take off, but
thank you for having us.
So we'll
it was nice meeting you.
So we'll let them get out, and then before we move on to talk about brain injury, we'll hear some of your lyrics. So how long have you been into music and rapping and all that?
Oh, I mean, I've always loved music. I never kind of take rapping serious. Just my friends would kind of just get together and just do it to mess around. And so, yeah, sometimes I just do it just kind of just to make people laugh,
Totally.
Sometimes just a smile can change somebody's day. So I just try to I try to like be the funny person, just make people laugh every now and then.
Do you we want to go freestyle for a couple lines and just show us what you
freestyle?
can do? Yeah.
Okay, I got one for you.
Pressure's on, man. You got lights and cameras now. There's no
and it's on a podcast too. People are gonna be seeing this. All right.
This is gonna be the highlight.
I'm dropping bombs. Why I'm wearing Toms. I went home and I said hi to your moms. Ooh. Straight fire.
He can't rap.
Somebody sign me.
Good. He's got to hype himself up. He comes up with one good line. He goes, ooh.
You know, every rapper has to have their trademark. You know, like Lil Wayne's like, yeah. You know, some mine's ooh.
No, that's
all we get.
Ooh, maybe later I'll whip something up.
As as
right there. I mean, you know, if there's any producers out there, somebody sign me.
That can be part of your trash talk. You know, you can just bust out a bunch of rhymes. We know when you're getting in people's face at the weigh-in and so forth. So, I mean, I have to say, from an outsider's perspective, you know, I'm never sure. You can tell us how much of the trash talk is legit, how much is promote the fight, because a lot of people come across like dicks, you know, when they're doing some of that. But then when it's over, you know, it's sort of like people like Rogan and other people will say, oh, they're just doing it to hype the fight. But you saw what happened with Khabib and Conor at the end. So definitely somebody was taking it seriously in there.
It depends on like if it's personal or if there's like a respect involved or, you know, if there's like harshness between the teams. Like, you know, at this level that I'm at, there's not going to be a whole lot of that there. So, you know, like if they sign the contract, they know what they're getting into. So I'll give them, you know, I'll feed them some trash talk here and there just to kind of get, you know, sell tickets, get the fans involved, make them want to see it. Other than that, you know, it's never really personal for me. I think, you know, there's only been like a couple times when I actually was like mad where I said some stuff like out of, you know, actually anger, and it's like, you know, you have one job and as an MMA fighter, and it's to make weight.
Sure. So it's business for the most part. It's business, not personal.
Right.
Because it looked like in the 5th round against Jepsen that you had neutralized his game so much that, you know, he was talking, and of course I couldn't hear, you know, kind of what he was saying, but we could see in your fight, we were looking there, you guys were talking to each other. Is that just to sort of fire yourself up and get in your opponent's head? Were you really feeling animosity at that point? Like, what was going on?
No, I mean, I've never really I talk to him nowadays. I've never really had a problem with him. Always had respect for him. You know, just I was trying to sell a fight, and you know, some people, you know, in the cage, it was kind of, you know, he was trying to lure me in and like kind of get me hyped up and get me to make mistakes, and I'm not the type person that typically does that. You know, I just stick to my game plan, and if it's working, it's working. And but you know, the weigh-ins with him was pretty interesting. Almost started a whole brawl.
Oh yeah.
Basically, you know, he had the title, and we were standing face to face, and he called me boy, and I was like, oh, you're calling me? I was like, you call me boy or something? We were trash talking, and I was like, oh, it's like, I'm gonna drown you out there. And he's like, trust me. He's like, I've been in plenty of deep water fights. He's like, you don't want to go to deep water with me. And I was like, you're talking to a shark. I was like, I'm gonna drown you out there. And we went to shake, you know, during the face-off. You know, we went to shake hands, and he like kind of jerked my arm a little bit, you know, like pulling it in. Mm-hmm. So when he did that, I stepped to the side, I pulled his arm back across, and I gave him a wet willy in front of everybody on stage.
Oh, during the weigh-ins?
Yep, and then he freaked out. He dropped his belt, started swinging at me.
Wow.
And then, like, he literally got super worked up, and he like ran off the stage, and he forgot his belt. And I picked his belt up and I held it up, and everybody was like, ooh. People were going crazy.
Did you ever see that face-off in Pride with Heath Herring where the guy kissed him and he knocked him out?
Oh yeah.
Oh dude, that was wow, what a weird thing that was. But so one of the things that I think, again, I'm not a fighter, and I don't want to purport to know like what's going on out there, but one of the things that bothers me as a fan is when people come out to touch gloves at the beginning of the round. I know it's protect yourself at all times, but they've got the fist out, the guy comes close, and they use it as a way to like get in and get a punch, or you know, they go for the takedown when the guy's just trying to shake hands in the beginning. That feels like a bitch move to me. Like, you know, what do you think about that?
I mean, I guess you kind of have to like, when they bring you to the middle, and they talk to you, you're supposed to touch gloves then.
Right, but then a lot of times you guys, and I think it's classy. You get there and the referee goes, "You guys ready? Gets ready, go." And I've seen your fights. You do it. You go out and you touch gloves again, and then you sort of back up and get started. I've seen people then use that as a chance to go in for a takedown or sucker punch the guy. That just feels unsportsmanlike to me.
I just feel like you have to be aware. Obviously, I've thought about doing that stuff before, but it's like at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm a little more classy than that.
Exactly.
But it's, when you touch gloves, you don't have to touch gloves again after you do it right there in front of the ref. If a fight starts, you can also, there's tells, if they're running at you or if they're, if they're circling to a certain way, or you can just kind of tell if they're going to try something goofy.
What did you think? So you mentioned that with the face-off at the weigh-in, you and this guy kind of got into it. What's your take on what happened at the end of when Conor fought Khabib and there was that great big brawl? What do you think about that?
I'm surprised it hasn't happened more than that. At least in certain occasions, I can expect it because they honestly don't like each other. They don't have respect, don't have respect for each other, and those situations, like religion, family,
sure,
stuff like that, all got into. Obviously, it's going to blow it up. It's a lot more personal.
Yeah.
There was a lot of built up for that too. So they both had probably a lot of built up.
That's where I think it might go too far. I get it. You're hyping the fight. Floyd Mayweather hypes a fight like nobody. And there's strategy in there. You get in the guy's head. Conor took out Jose Aldo in a way that I would never have thought that he would have taken him out like that. I watched Jose Aldo beat Uriah Faber up and down a cage for 10 rounds, and I would never have thought he'd have gotten taken out that quickly. But everyone's like, man, he got in his head and he did all this stuff. And the Diaz brothers do that, so you get off balance. But somehow, at the end, when the business is done, it was too bad because then Khabib had to get a big suspension, and he'd won dominant fashion. It was too bad in a way, but it just gets built up. And
I don't know if I would say dominant fashion, but he won.
Okay, no, fair enough. Just because we try to limit to 2 hours, we're about 20 minutes away, maybe a little bit more. I want to get your take on a couple of things. So when I was first becoming a fan, Dana White was like, "No way we're ever doing women. That would be ridiculous." And the rise of women's MMA, Ronda Rousey, and then Ronda Rousey got destroyed and so forth. What's your take on women's MMA?
I think it's it should be just as popular as men's. I think obviously I feel like everybody should be paid equally, for their amount of experience or and whatever like that. It's a lot easier for them to make money than it is for guys.
Okay. Because of sponsorships?
Sponsorships. More people want to sponsor women.
Okay.
Because women want to buy from women. Guys want to buy something for their wife or for their girlfriend from a woman. Guys are more prone to looking at women, so it's easier. Just people get more out of it, but when they sponsor women.
Okay.
And and then when it comes to social media, women blow up way faster. They get more of these all that stuff on social media because all these guys are trying to follow this hot MMA fighter girl.
Right.
It's easier for them to make money when it comes to that kind of stuff. So when they say they're paid unfairly, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Because it's easier for them to make money. I'm a fan of it. I think they put in just as much work. They put in as much time. They're just as skilled.
I'd say some of the fighters are just incredible. Great speed, great on the ground.
Mm-hmm. So I like women's MMA. I just think it's just hard because I just don't feel like there's as much of a talent pool as there is for men's.
When part of it may be a matter of timing in that it hasn't been a thing for as long. So there were people that might have otherwise done MMA that wound up not doing MMA because it wasn't available to them. The next 10 years, I guess, we'll see. The other thing I wanted to talk about, because it's hot in many sports right now. I am not a good powerlifter, but I'm a competitive powerlifter. Both the USAPL and the IPF have made a statement about transgender athletes that for now, in those sanctioning bodies, you have to lift in your birth gender. Regardless, you can identify however you want, call yourself whatever you want, but you're gonna lift in your birth gender.
What if I identified as something else before I was born?
Before you were born, that's an interesting philosophical question that I don't know how you'd prove that. But, and I know you're a fan of Rogan, and so am I, the whole Fallon Fox thing, transgender in any sports, the Olympics, in all the major sports is becoming more and more of a thing. What's your take on the you know about the Fallon Fox thing, I assume?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your take on the Fallon Fox thing and anything to do with any of the sports? You're the MMA expert, that's why I asked you about that. But any of the sports and transgender stuff and competing in the different categories, what do you think about that?
I think it's a little ridiculous. I think just, I don't want to sound like mean or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have nothing against like homosexuality. I have nothing against people being gay. Some of my closest friends are gay, have been
Sure.
gay. I have relatives that are, lesbian, and so I have nothing against that. I think that is purely, a little bit implanted in their head as a child and cartoon stuff nowadays. But mostly it's, like you're born, liking the same sex. But as for, I'm not happy in my own body, give it time. It's the same thing I said earlier, but I don't necessarily agree with the whole transgender and getting it paid for and, being able to compete in the different sexes sports. Right. And, I don't think a guy should be able to, no matter how much testosterone he's taken out of his body, he should be allowed to compete in the women's. And, I don't think a woman should be able to be a man and compete there. But now if you're thinking, equal rights and women should have the same rights and same things as men, and how women are women just are strong and just as smart as men, or vice versa. It's I think if a woman wants to, if she's cleared and she's able to compete amongst men, go for it. But do I think a man should be able to come down and compete amongst women? Not necessarily.
So that's an interesting duality. I want to unpack that just for a second. I think that you express it well. There's a divergence in what should we sort of accept in society. As far as I'm concerned, you can call yourself whatever you want. I definitely think it's possible that people are born feeling like they're in the wrong body, feeling like they were born the different sex. When you want to compete, however, it becomes a very different thing. And in powerlifting, what I think is going to happen is I think the USAPL and the IPF are going to have to create a transgender category. Because again, it's an interesting thing you pose, which I probably want to unpack about. So in your mind, if a man wants to compete in women's MMA, well, okay, if a transgender woman, which is how if we use the proper language, a transgender woman, born a man, in the wrong body, transgender woman wants to compete in women's MMA, that's not okay. But if a woman becomes a transgender man and wants to compete in MMA, you don't have a problem with that. So if your next opponent was born a woman but identified as a man, you would have no problem fighting him, would be the parlance he would want to be used. That wouldn't bother you at all.
I mean, probably not. I would just hope that they wouldn't tell me that they were transgender. Because I don't know. It's just like a, at the end of the day, I still feel like they're a woman, and I don't think you should necessarily do it. So maybe I would still fight them, but I wouldn't. Maybe I wouldn't try to punch them.
Sure.
Maybe I'd just try to restrain them and then choke them and hope they tap out.
Well,
but
and I think that's an important part of the conversation, because most of us that are raised not to be assholes are pretty much taught that you don't hit a woman. So if in the scenario that you present, where it would be okay for a woman with let's say no reassignment surgery to compete in the men's division as a man, there are going to be people that are going to be like, am I allowed to punch here? What do I do? And that it changes the sport in a way. This is an extreme example, but only through extreme examples do we make the point a lot of times. So the last powerlifting competition I was in, there were a bunch of kids. So there were kids, and they were deadlifting the bar. which is 45 pounds. So I could have whipped the shit out of those little bastards. Like I definitely could have been first place if I'd have competed in the kids division. And you hear there's that one jerk off in the news that said he identified as like an 8-year-old girl or something like that, and he was a middle-aged man. I mean, so I think that you can get to the extremes, which is why when competition comes around, it has to be thought of differently in some way. But I didn't know if you amongst the fighters, because ever since Fallon Fox, it hasn't come up a whole lot that I've heard. So I didn't know if you guys ever talked about it kind of amongst yourselves in the profession.
I mean, not really. I mean, at least I haven't. I just think the whole, I only think there are two sexes. I don't think you should switch sexes. I think if you're a woman and you want to bone a woman, you should be able to. If you're a man and you want to bone a man, you should be able to. But as far as like, oh, I think I'm a car, I think I'm a little kid, or I don't feel comfortable like in my body and I want to be a female, or I'm a girl and I want to be a man. I just, as a woman, like, compete in the men's division. Like if you want to, like, go ahead, but you don't need to like have a sex change. And as a man, you got the shitty end of the stick. You're a man, So like you gotta stay in that division. I know it wasn't that long ago that if you had these, I call them feelings because I don't necessarily believe that they're like real.
Okay.
But you might feel a certain way at one time. You might feel like you want to die, but do you really want to die? No. You might feel like it'd be better to be a female, but would it be better to be a female? You don't know. Vice versa. So I don't necessarily think that, not long ago people, if they had these feelings, it was a mental disorder.
So gender dysphoric disorder is still a classified mental disorder. We can get off into a medical conversation that's going to take us longer. So definitely we talk about in the future. I would love to talk about it. I want to make sure that we get through a couple more things, but I just wanted to get your take on the competition thing. So let's say that you are listening to this program and you're thinking about becoming an MMA fighter at whatever age, but let's assume younger people. What would be some advice that you would have if someone's thinking that?
Thinking what? Becoming a fighter?
Becoming a professional fighter.
Okay. I thought you were saying thinking
no.
being a transgender. I was like, don't.
We're moving beyond the transgender conversation. So up and coming,
if you're thinking of being
middle school, high school,
an MMA fighter, any athlete in general, listen to your coaches. I mean, your coaches. I mean, there's been times. I mean, he was like a father to me growing up. I hated him when I was younger. This guy's an asshole, blah, blah, blah. Why is he always picking on me? Why is he so mean to me? Blah, 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 blah. Come to find out, he literally just, wanted what was best for me, wanted to help me out. He trial and error himself. He knew it worked, so he was trying to push it on me, and I was just a stubborn kid, didn't want to listen. And now I'm teaching the same things that he taught me to other kids. His name is Chad Hahn. He was one of my high school coaches and junior club coach. He coached me since I was, young. But it's just like I would just say, like, listen to your coaches and just try to stay open-minded and always get enough sleep.
Sleep. Okay.
Sleep, I say, is the biggest. It's going to help you recover. It's going to help your brain recover, your body. It's going to help you, grow. It's going to help you retain information. It's going to make you think quicker. I know everybody's seen the Joe Rogan podcast on the sleep guy, the neuroscientist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he did like a whole thing on that. And I even used to only get like 4 to 6 hours of sleep every day. And I was like, damn, why am I not like performing the way I want to? And once I started making a change and I made sure I was getting 8 hours sleep every day, I felt happier. I felt like I got more done,
Mm-hmm. Probably recovering better from your workouts.
Correct.
So training, sleep, let's talk about diet and nutrition a little bit. What kind of a diet regimen do you follow? What would you recommend for people that want to be athletes and especially fighters?
I would say stay fit and know your limits and try to push them. As a diet, I live off of what the great Chad Johnson Chad Ochocinco, wide receiver for the Bengals. He said, you can eat whatever you want as long as you put in the work. And he ate McDonald's a lot. And so, I train so much, I know I can put, there's things I need in my body, but there's sometimes, like, if I can't get that, like, as long something is good. Something's better than nothing. And so, I know that as long as I put in work, I can eat whatever I want. And I feel like that's just how everybody should be. And, like, cutting weight, I think you should maybe cut a little bit for a fight. Cutting 20 pounds, that's probably excessive.
Yeah.
But and most people are getting away from that now. You see, most people are moving up anyways, and a lot of these fighters, like Dustin Poirier, he's fighting for a title at 155 pounds. He fought at 145 for the longest time. He was cutting all this weight. Mm-hmm. But he looks good at 155 pounds. He's filled out, and it's like, and it also comes with age. You're growing. You're still growing as an adult. You're going to put on that weight. You ever look at your grandpa's hands, right? They look like just boulders of hands, right? It just comes with age. Their knuckles are harder. Their bone structure is different at that age. And so I feel like just cutting weight has just gotten overrated.
Cutting weight is definitely something that I would love to talk about. Back to the diet thing for a second. So you don't follow a prescribed diet like the paleo diet or the ketogenic diet or something like that?
I eat whatever I want, when I want, except for I try not to drink 6 weeks before a fight, unless it's a very special occasion, like a wedding or something. So I don't drink 6 weeks before a fight. And then I eat whatever I want, snacks, everything, except for if I have to cut weight. So if I have to cut, like a few pounds or whatever, I just make sure I have a decent diet. I just meal prep for an entire week.
Give us an idea of a decent diet. Like what's a regular meal when you're cutting? Because if you're eating snacks at McDonald's, but like during a cut, like what's a normal meal?
Two protein shakes a day with 50 plus grams of protein. All the other aminos, vitamins I need. Like a Proteinic energy bar once or twice a day. The day of weigh-ins, so right after I weigh in, and then that night up until the morning, I carb load.
Okay.
I prefer chicken and rice from a Japanese, Chinese restaurant.
Okay.
So chicken fried rice, and then a lot of Pedialyte.
Okay.
So that's what I do right after weigh-in. But other than that, I just meal prep, rice, chicken, rice, steak, rice, beef, mashed potatoes. A lot of people are like, oh, you cut carbs out, blah, blah, blah. But if you want to have a good training camp and you want to still be able to train hard and not feel like trash, you got to have carbs. And I love carbs.
Yeah. One of our previous guests was a registered dietitian who is a big advocate of plant-based diets. And I know that there have been throughout the years.
Herbalife?
No, yeah. Right. My wife used to always say Herbalife shakes will just make you poop a lot. But I know that the Diaz brothers, at least at one point, were, and then Jake Shields was sort of full plant-based and so forth. Do you have any opinions on vegan athletes, plant-based athletes?
I don't know a whole lot. I have a fraternity brother. I'm in a fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma, Fraternity Incorporated, part of the Divine Nine. I have a fraternity brother. His name is Antonio Muzon, and he is a big Herbalife guy. But that guy's been super overweight, and he's lost a ton of weight, gotten really fit. He opened up his own little shack where he holds workouts for children, for women, for guys, anybody who wants to get a workout in and eat healthy and get shakes. And what he's done is really, really, really good. And then he went back to school, got his master's, and he's a personal empowerment teacher and motivational speaker. And I think he's somebody that you would love to have on here to talk to.
I would love to. One of the things we always ask the guests as we near the end is, it's conversations with interesting people. We want to know people that you think are interesting, people that are listening who they think are interesting. So I would love to talk to that guy. There's a very damning documentary on Netflix about Herbalife and what a bad company it is, basically. I'd love to get his take on that for sure. But, okay, so we're wrapping up. Before we close, this weekend, Khabib versus Poirier. Yes?
I got Poirier by knockout.
Okay. So you predicted against Khabib the last time. Are you?
Yeah. I mean, Khabib had a really, really good game plan. Conor had a really good game plan too. Just Khabib just capitalized on his a little bit more. There was a couple times Khabib, set up for the takedown, and he ate a punch. He had to scramble around with Conor. Most people don't really scramble around with Khabib. But he was able to set it up, and once he noticed that Conor was like looking and reacting and dropping his hands ready for the takedown, he came over top, with that big one, and and Conor was just being cocky and dumb, not fighting like he knows how to fight. So I think in a rematch, I feel like Conor would win, and it would probably be a lot better fight. But I know Khabib struggles with southpaws. There's just a report or something like that, like he just got knocked out cold in his training camp by a southpaw that he brought in to help train with him. Dustin Poirier is one of the best southpaws there is in the UFC. I mean, he has amazing cardio. He can throw volume. He can throw power. He's very well rounded on the ground. He has some of the best takedown defense in the UFC, and he's hungry.
Yeah.
And so I think he wins. I think he gets a TKO or catches Khabib and knocks him out. Should
be a good fight. And you mentioned that you're a left-hander, and I've always heard people say that it's really hard for traditional fighters. It's like fighting in the mirror, like everything's kind of backwards. And is that something that you use to your advantage? You think your left-handed game at all, or is it just kind of the way it is, and then it's up to them to deal with it?
I mean, I feel like I said, it's like you said, it's a mirror. So southpaws are kind of used to they call it a southpaw advantage because we know that we're goofy.
Okay.
So we kind of already used to it. But it's orthodox people, when they go against a southpaw person, have the exact same advantage we do. They're just not used to using it, in my opinion. So, but I think. That's kind of one of those areas where just you just got to kind of feel it out.
Excellent.
But like I said, Eric Koch, he's a UFC fighter. He's in Cedar Rapids. He's what Twitch is? Yeah. He's a big Twitch guy. He plays video games. He's on a famous team called the Worst Fire Team Ever. Okay. There's actually the guy from Workaholics. Had the mustache. He was one of the main characters. I can't remember exactly what his name is right off the top of my head, but he's part of that group, and so. But Eric's a good guy, and I know he kind of loves doing this kind of stuff. And if you really want a good insight on what it's like in the UFC, what it's like being an MMA fighter who has 20 plus fights under his belt, and he's a super nice guy, and I think he would love to help you out with this too.
Dude, hook us up. I would love to talk to him. And I really want to thank you for A, you filled in so quickly. B, you are such an interesting guy, so heartfelt. The warrior poet. And I think the quote of the day was, chicks can bone chicks if they want to, or whatever it was he said. Right. Tell anybody listening, if they want to follow you on social media, where can they find you? When's your next thing you want to promote? I know it's maybe up in the air, so tell us how to do that before we sign off.
Well, I have my next professional fight September 28th at the McGrath Harley-Davidson dealership in Dubuque, Iowa. Doors open at 7 o'clock. You can message me if you need tickets. But my Instagram is BLUGHOST so it's Blue Ghost BJJ. My Twitter handle is exactly the same. Currently, I'm not active on Facebook right now. I'm dealing with some Facebook and Microsoft difficulties, so I haven't been active on it for almost 2 years now. Okay. So, so just reach out to me if you have any questions. You can DM me on Instagram. If you have any questions about training, wrestling, mixed martial arts, if you need somebody to talk to, if you feel like you're suffering from depression, or if you're just an outdoorsman and you like to camp, hunt, and fish, I got plenty of content on there on that.
Excellent. Dude, thanks so much for being here. Thanks everybody for listening on whatever platform this is, and we'll see you the next time.
Thank you.